Welcoming guys, settle down, grab your heartbeat, share us round. Now tap that screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it, it's your warm-up routine. Gang gremlins on the scene. Oh, 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 gang gremlins on the scene. Oh, oh, gang gremlins on the scene. Oh,
Benjamin is in the house.
on the scene. Now tap that screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it. Gang gremlins, come and let's go. Now tap that screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it. Let's see those team stickers flow. Oh, oh, gang gremlins on the scene. Oh, oh, now tap that screen. Oh, 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 oh. Now tap that screen. Now tap that screen. Oh, oh, gang gremlins on the scene.
Thanks for the follow!
Gaga Grumps says he was on kitchen duty again lol.
Grumps says it's summer what cooking and dishwasher stuffing does to an old fart.
Summer says, oh, okay.
The man says gay.
Gaga Grumps says I have voice.
Grumps says at the man that's good for you.
Gaga Grumps says your curiosity is natural, but if you have any questions please leave them on my non-speaking pinned post for me to answer later.
Grumps says at Ollie why don't you ask her?
We would be honored if you would join us. We would be honored.
Saren, not
if
Saren,
you would
says, hey
join
Gaga,
us.
how are you? X?
We would be honored if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says simple answer equals bad paralysis day and my face hates me lol.
The creative one says at Ollie, it's the latest
Thanks for
fashion
the
craze.
follow.
Haven't you heard?
Nope.
Grumps says at Actville no plural in Wordle.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says Saren in the house thanks for doing your daily heart. Gaga Grumps says Oscar in the house, thanks for doing your
We would
daily
be
heart.
honored if you would join us.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart, Summer.
Thanks for the follow. Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says I'm in my pirate phase. But why is the rum gone?
Grump says if you post some weird shite nobody can read. I am assuming it's something malicious and you're out.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
The creative one says at Grumps tell him Grumps.
Grump says Q to kick off the day.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Level up.
Gaga Grumps says we
Level
start
up.
at S.
Summer says at PH7.
Grump says at PH7.
Gaga Grumps says creative in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart. Gaga Grumps says thanks for the Rose Network Q.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says PH7 in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart. Gaga Grumps says level up for PH7 coming after the game. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thon, race to the top. Like a thon, tap and don't stop. Like a thon, who will be crowned? Like a thon, gremlin renowned. Like a thon, fingers on fire. Like a thon, gremlins don't tire. Like a thon, hearts
Gaga
beat
Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Grump says at Lyra no, never.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
TH7 says at R55N, no spamming TLS.
Summer says is Grumps muting PPL.
Gaga Grumps says creative straight in with their win of the day, your word starting with S, please
We
creative.
would be honored if you would join us.
Grumps says at PH7 he's taking a time out.
Level up.
Grumps says at Summer would I.
For creative one says saucy.
Gaga Grumps says Grumps is pushing buttons.
Thanks for
Grumps says at Dorintopal 1409 for spamming.
My alt says shake. Gaga Grumps says saucy you got.
Mild says shake.
Grumps says at Dorintopal 1409 it's not your turn, wind your neck in.
Summer says super.
Gaga Grumps says wheel on the nose.
Grumps says wheel.
Mild says at Summer yes super. Saren not Saren says sweet.
Gaga Grumps says super fits.
PH7 says sweet.
Grumps says at Shorty you cannot be in 3. Grumps says at Lucrobo 16 higher.
Gaga Grumps says we added a homeless P.
Summer says spout.
Gaga Grumps says your curiosity is natural, but if you have any questions please leave them on my non-speaking pinned post for me to answer later.
Saren not Saren says spout.
Mild says spout.
PH7 says spout.
Gaga Grumps says spout works.
Summer says at 5:55 and look at her pinned post and comment. She will answer a comment later.
Saren not Saren says at 5:55 and she's doing pirate cosplay.
Summer says I give her time.
fireworks for Gaga.
Grumps says at 55 one too many questions.
Explode 'em on her face, she's in a happy place.
Saren, not Saren, says trying to make you laugh Gaga.
Wordle within 3, so gifts explode with glee. Fireworks for Gaga. Emojis make
Mild
her
says
happy. As in her face they slappy. Fireworks for Gaga.
Summer says at 5:55 and
Fireworks for Gaga. From a single rose to a whole bouquet. Anything will be
Gaga Grumps says
okay.
Wordle in 3. Let's see those fireworks in the chat.
Still win the day. Fireworks for Gaga.
Grumps says at AYESHA you got another appointment to keep.
Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for
Gaga
Gaga.
Grumps says oh the eldest asked me where the rum had gone. Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Summer says at Marshall to Dr. to what?
Saren not Saren says my 2-year-old is dancing with you Gaga.
Good game.
Good game. Good game. Good game.
Gaga Grumps says a quick segue for this. Level up in the room for.
Good game.
Guessed it wrong, you guessed
Good
it
game.
right. Now here we
Good
are,
game.
another high.
Good game.
Support was led, seriously you'd spell wow. This level's ours, come out with me now.
Level up.
Green, green, look at that glow. Didn't solve Wordle solo though. Support came in, guess it snapped.
Level up.
Shout out chat. New fandom level, streak still alive. Wordle solved and you helped me thrive. Tomorrow we guess, same time, same chat, same brilliant brains. Remember that.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for leveling up in the room PH7.
Level up.
Summer says Saren, not Saren.
You guessed it right. Now here we are, another height. If support was led, seriously
Gaga
you'd
Grumps
spell
says in the second one for my
level's
alt.
ours, come out with me now. Green, green, look at that glow. Didn't solve Wordle solo though.
Level up.
Support came in, guess it snapped. Level unlocked, shout out chat. New fandom level, streak still alive. Wordle solved and you helped me thrive. Tomorrow we guess, same time, same chat, same brilliant brains. Remember that.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for leveling up in the room my alt. Gaga Grumps says thanks Mera we try. Gaga Grumps says thanks Anna.
Sarah Not Saren says I don't need a level up song Gaga.
Level up.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Grumps says it's Saren, not Saren.
Gaga Grumps says ha, you can have one after the next game, Saren. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle.
Saren, not Saren says at Gaga and Grumps I don't need one.
Gaga Grumps says Jack in the house thanks for doing your daily heart.
Summer says at Keenan pardon.
Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Summer says a Keenan WDYM pirate or a ship.
Summer says I got it.
Grumps says it's Saren, not Saren. It's a non-negotiable social convention. Just roll over and accept it. Grumps says it's Summer.
Gaga Grumps says Summer on the nose.
Summer says at Keenan, yeah, I did, but what do you mean by it?
Gaga grumps, says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Grumps says at Dorinto Pal 1409 you are spamming again.
PH7 says at Dorinto Pal 1409 time out for you.
Summer says at Keenan after I look at her pinned video, you can comment and she will answer later.
Grumps says at HANDBAGS4WHINERS oral.
Gaga grumps, says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Grumps says at Abby Haya.
Gaga grumps, says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga grumps, says your word starting with T, please Ryan, and cause I didn't see you come in.
Crystal says good morning.
Grumps says that Suri loves Bon Jovi, you may address her directly.
Gaga grumps, says I am my nail worker lol.
Grumps says at Crystal morning.
Gaga grumps, says testy you got.
Crystal says at Grumps morning.
Gaga grumps, says CR Haristal in the house.
PH7 says poker or trap.
Crystal says niche. Gaga grumps, says thanks Suri. TikTok shop and a bit of nail glue does wonders lol.
A creative one says baker.
Sarah not Sarah says cared.
Gaga grumps, says yellow E in need of a home. Gaga grumps, says let's bake this trap in early. Gaga grumps, says no trap. 8 letters wiped from the game.
Summer says clove.
Summer says Noah.
Gaga Grumps says clean works.
PH7 says feign. Summer says clove.
PH7 says no.
Gaga Grumps says I stand corrected. No AQ.
PH7 says glove.
Summer says clovey.
The creative one says probe.
Gaga Grumps says clove works.
Summer says if it's glove im dene.
Crystal says Mitch still works.
Summer says at pinkish. Don't spam.
Gaga Grumps says we added a homeless L. Wordle is being tight with
Thanks
this
for
one.
the follow.
Well, creative one says no.
Summer says at pinkish or spamming something it can't be.
TH7 says impel.
Seren not Seren says that Jesse 300.214 no V.
PH7 says field.
Gaga Grumps says no E in 4 or 5.
PH7 says field or whelp.
Gaga Grumps says field is a shout.
Handy says what happened. Summer says at pinkish. It can't be Blake Loke at the letters before you type there's no BA or K.
PH7 says wheeled.
Seren not Seren says yield.
Summer says wheeled.
Gaga Grumps says your curiosity is natural, but if you have any questions, please leave them on my non-speaking pinned post for me to answer later.
Well, creative one says yield.
Summer says at NUFC for life pinned video comment she will answer later.
PH7 says only option Y is out.
Gaga Grumps says wheeled the only option I see.
Grumps says at UFC 4 life misplaced it.
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Thanks for the follow.
Good game.
Well, creative one says at K.S it's fashion day.
Gaga Grumps says a quick segue for this. Level up in the room for
We
Sarah.
would be honored if you would join us.
Level up.
Now here we are, another height. If support was letters, you'd spell wow. This level's ours.
Grumps says at Mia Hyatt.
Green, green, look at that glow. Didn't solve Wordle solo though. Support came in, guess this snap. Level unlocked, shout out chat. New fandom level, streak still alive. Wordle solved and you helped me fry. Tomorrow we guess, same time, same chat, same brilliant brains. Remember that.
Handbags for Whiners says what's up everyone.
Handbags for whiners says at Grumps hey.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for leveling up in the room, Seren. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Grumps says it HANDBAGS4WHINERS phone hijacked again, is it?
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle.
HANDBAGS4WHINERS says at Grumps something is wrong.
Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Grumps says at HANDBAGS4WHINERSO, a lot, can narrow down your concerns.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A, B. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thumb, race to the top, like a thun, tap and don't stop, like a thun, who will be crowned, like a thun, gremlin renowned, like a thun, fingers on fire, like a thun, gremlins don't tire, like
Crystal says are we allowed to snipe before reset? Lol, that would be a great snipe.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Grumps says at Odie's nut.
Gaga Grumps says you can snipe whenever you want, lol. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with B, please, Ryan.
Grumps says at Odie's how what?
Handbags for Whiners says at Crystal Katie did it the other day.
Gaga Grumps says again yes, you can snipe whenever you want. Someone sniped as soon as they entered the room once and I gave them the next word.
Handbags for whiners, says Bumpy.
Crystal says at HANDBAGS4WHINERS, hey there. Gaga Grumps says Bumpy you got. Gaga Grumps says it's a vibe Els.
it's a Wordle wipeout. No letters to shout. Wipeout.
Gaga Grumps says wipeouts in the chat.
Lost
Neuerbier says swear.
Gaga grumps says swear fits.
Grumps says at PERLA-ROSSE no PY.
Gaga grumps says I am going to prepare a pirate-themed Wordle for next eye patch day ha.
Grumps says at PERLA-ROSSE no.
Gaga grumps says nearly a double. A yellow A in need of a home.
Grumps says at HANDBAGS4WHINERS again. Clara List says chain.
Neuerbier says no you for allowed.
Grumps says it, Rebecca, no P.
Gaga grumps says Noya and Claire in the house. Gaga grumps says thanks for doing your daily hearth L.
Crystal says at Rebecca Noe.
Handbags for whiners says he'll be back.
Neuerbier says a lot.
A creative one says anvil.
Handbags for whiners says reset.
Gaga grumps says chain fits. Gaga grumps says we added a homeless N.
L says paint.
Gaga grumps says no P.
Neuerbier says tango.
Claire Ellis says L no.
Gaga grumps says tango is a shout.
L says oh yes, sorry.
Handbags for whiners says I'm new here. Is this the party house?
Neuerbier says along. Gaga grumps says we have ourselves an almost anagram.
LL Creative 1 says along.
Claire Alice says go now.
Gaga Grumps says along is in the grid.
Welcome, Gremlins, to
Moya
the
Beer
game
says
grotto.
congrat.
Welcome, Gremlins, to the game grotto. Welcome in, guys. Settle down. Grab your heart.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Tap that screen, yeah, tap it. It's your warm-up routine. Game Gremlins on the scene. Game Gremlins on the scene.
Gaga Grumps says welcome Gremlins to the game grotto. Take a seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points and prepare for more.
Good game. Good game.
Now tap that screen. Tap it. Tap that screen, yeah, tap it. Game Gremlins coming, let's go.
Good game.
Now tap that screen.
Good game.
Tap that screen, yeah, tap it. Let's see those team stickers flow.
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says treasure box up if you need a coin for your daily heart.
Good game. Good game.
Now tap that screen.
Good game. Good game. Good game. Good
Now
game.
tap that screen.
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next week.
Good game.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Well, Creative 1 says I can't see the treasure.
Game Gremlins on the scene.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart, Crystal and Noya. Gaga Grumps says we know creative. Sorry. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle.
Saren Not Saren says, Creative, are you American?
Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. P.
Noya Bear says plant.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Everybody get down! It's the freaking diamond!
Noibia says forget about leaderboard.
Race to the top like a thon. Tap and don't stop like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned like a thon. Fingers on fire like a thon. Gremlins don't tie.
Crystal says Pearl.
Hearts beat flying like a thon. Gremlins defying.
Gaga Grumps says lol and the crown has been stolen before the race even began. Gaga Grumps says Pearl you got lol.
Well, Creative One says I leveled up.
Crystal says lol. It delayed longer than I wanted lol.
Gaga Grumps says wipeouts in the chat.
Grumps says it Crystal.
Neuebeer says ghost.
Crystal says wipeout.
Grumps says that she had it on someone and in the course of events misplaced.
Benjamin is in the house.
Level up.
Gaga Grumps says LTJ in the house. Gaga Grumps says your curiosity is natural, but if you have any questions please leave them on my non-speaking pinned post for me to answer later.
Creative One says bossy.
Grumps says it ill Creative One.
Neuebeer says ghost.
Gaga Grumps says level up for creative coming after this game. Gaga Grumps says think fits. Gaga Grumps says nearly a double again. K needs a home 9 letters wiped from the grid.
Crystal says CAY.
Gaga Grumps says that's a shame.
PH7 says cuckoo.
Neuebeer says try Boxpulls.
Neuebeer says no plural.
PH7 says or kudos better.
Gaga Grumps says O2 doubles would they? Gaga Grumps says of course they would. LL Creative One says no R. Gaga Grumps says okay, wasn't expecting that.
PH7 says a pair of socks.
PH7 says the only pair words allowed are cause, socks and jeans.
Crystal says socks.
PH7 says it's definitely socks.
Gaga Grumps says is it this one that does the multiple plurals then?
PH7 says yes, that's correct.
Crystal says it's a pair, yes.
Gaga Grumps says cause I've heard it said but never come across it in the original.
Grumps says it Jacob, calm down.
Good game.
Moya Beer says thought no plural.
Gaga Grumps says we played almost the entire Wordle archive and never came across the exception.
Grumps says it HANDBAGS4WHINERS new as in.
Crystal says jeans is another one, that is a pair of jeans.
Gaga Grumps says Noir, I've heard the exception is for things that come in pairs but never seen it myself until today. Gaga Grumps says Wordrama. We ran out of Wordle archives and I had to find a new one.
Grumps says at NOYABEAR heart hands there are a few exceptions with things that come in pairs. Like socks.
It's playtime! Gaga is in the box!
Grumps says at HANDBAGS4WHINERS different.
Grumps is on the buttons! Don't let him push yours! Are you ready to play? Let those
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Which team are you on? Team Gaga, give a cheer.
The creative one says Shrek is in the house.
Crystal says Gaga and Grumps, also no past tense.
Gaga Grumps says this one keeps track of the street rules.
Grumps says at HANDBAGS4WHINERS performance is off. Took me a few days to get used to it.
Game! Gremlins, let's go!
Gaga Grumps says oh, that's a new one.
Game! Gremlins, let's go!
Gaga Grumps says Doobadoo Gaga. Share the live chat, the chat, and shower her with roses and GGs.
Crystal says Worddrama is great to use.
Gaga Grumps says so no baked and stuff. Gaga Grumps says I'll have to stop accepting them. Gaga Grumps says hi Abby. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Crystal says Gaga and Grumps not solves.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says then I will stop accepting them. I've always done solves only after first guess unless filter needed.
Grumps says at HANDBAGS4WHINERS I'm frying off some mince at the moment, spaghetti with a nice sugo.
Exan Bacon says ahoy there Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says Bolognese Grumps. Sugo is so European lol. Gaga Grumps says eggs in the house. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Grumps says at Gaga and Grumps is correct and is one of the hills I'm prepared to die on.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. N.
Grumps says at HANDBAGS4WHINERS trust me, it'd switch you two out immediately.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Grumps says, preloading the banhammer.
Noibia says leaderboard.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says ahoy there Keenan. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with N please Ryan. Gaga Grumps says I got it Ryan. My reply got filtered lol.
Naya Beer says stack.
Crystal says verbs with ed do not solve, but if adjectives with ed do so, like fried, is used as a common adjectives.
Crystal says hope this helps.
Noib says stack. Gaga Grumps says oh for heaven's sake. I saw and replied to nasty. Don't know why I typed night lol.
Grumps says at HANDBAGS4WHINERS she took her eye off the ball.
Gaga Grumps says lol. Gaga Grumps says total fits and tests the T for 2 places.
Grumps says at Luke.M_00 silence.
Exan Bacon says I recon it's her trap.
Gaga Grumps says T lives at number 3 Wordle Street.
Noyobia says better.
Gaga Grumps says probably eggs.
Exan Bacon says noted.
Exan Bacon says NVM.
LL Creative 1 says Petal.
Exan Bacon says petty.
Jack Wright says at Eggs and Bacon 1T.
Noibi says cuto.
Gaga Grumps says I've just been told that no past tense in this one, so noted is not a valid solve and won't be accepted.
Caddy says hello. Exan Bacon says at Jack Righto yes.
Gaga Grumps says retry works.
Jack Wright says retry.
Eggs and bacon says a last.
Caddy says deter.
Jack Wright says at HANDBAGS4WHINERS on. Grump says at HANDBAGS4WHINERS. Who said that?
Gaga Grumps says E moved into number 2 and R needs a home. LL Creative One says better.
Grump says at Catty Heyer.
Jack Wright says at handbags for whiners no.
Well, Creative One says NVM.
Gaga Grumps says Catty in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart.
Grump says at Catty.
Eggs and bacon says meter works.
The creative one says no tea.
The creative one says no R.
Gaga Grumps says meter is a shout.
Grump says at HANDBAGS4WHINERS. Did you do the daily heart?
Noya Beer says Peter.
Exan Bacon says can't be Peter, isn't it? No names.
Grump says at E no.
Gaga Grumps says I see 2 options for 2 guesses.
A Creative One says B2.
Gaga Grumps says Peter as in petering out, not the name.
Eggs and bacon says, oh right, just that my dad's name's spelt Peter.
Grump says at Florianwerts _2026A.
Noabia says Jita.
Gaga Grumps says you're not wrong, eggs. Just is a verb too.
PH7 says deter.
PH7 says deter.
Noya Bear says Jeter.
Gaga Grumps says guess who lost a 50-50.
PH7 says they usually don't allow proper nouns.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
The creative one says at ACX and 6 letter.
Grump says at Snoopy. Never, no chance.
Well, creative one says, did you do my level up or did I miss it?
Gaga Grumps says the meaning of filter is to diminish gradually and come to an end. Without usually used without.
Grumps says at HANDBAGS4WHINERS you scared half of them off now.
Gaga Grumps says no coming up creative. Gaga Grumps says a quick segue for this. Level up in the room for creative.
It's a LLL level up. I guessed it wrong, you guessed it right. Now here we are, another height. If support was letters, you'd spell wow. This level's ours, come out with me now. Green, green, look at that glow. Didn't solve Wordle solo though. Support came in, guess it snapped. Level unlocked, shout out New fandom level.
Grumps says at HANDBAGS4WHINERS stand in the corner and ponder your sins.
Tomorrow we guess, same time, same chat, same brilliant brains. Remember that.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for leveling up in the room creative.
Grumps says Cooper time.
Crystal says, oh yeah.
It's Cooper!
The creative one says you.
It's Cooper!
Gaga Grumps says and now we wiggle.
Wiggle butt, just a little mud with the wiggle butt. Gremlin say what? He's a corgi, don't you know? His name is Cooper, watch him go. Wiggle butt, just a little mud with the wiggle butt. Gremlin say what? With the wiggle butt, just a little mud with the wiggle butt. Gremlin say what? With the wiggle butt.
Grumps says that Ashley is the best short. It's only £199.99 a month.
Cooper, we do, yeah. Wiggle butt, just a little mud with the wiggle butt. Gremlin say what? With the wiggle butt.
Well, Creative One says at Gaga, you're a dancing pirate queen today.
Gaga Grumps says Grumps made me laugh part way through that selling the mod job lol. Gaga Grumps says I'll take it creative. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Crystal says at handbags for Winer's Law.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says, what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Welcome Freddy to Wordle with Gaga. Grumps says that's rigged.
Gaga Grumps says, oh, nearly his cue.
Welcome
Grumps says it's
FLYNN to Wordle with Gaga.
them. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. S.
Crystal says Grumps go to HR.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Grumps says that Crystal is writing a stern email as we speak.
Gaga Grumps says he is HR lol. Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says Ryan won the race and Catty stormed in and stole the crown.
LL Creative One says Grumps.
Caddy says steam please.
Gaga Grumps says steam you got. Gaga Grumps says I'm sorry to hear that, Lexi. As you can see, not a great day for me either lol. Gaga Grumps says yellow E&M in need of a home. Gaga Grumps says hi Kate. I'm ticking along. Gaga Grumps says model fits. Gaga Grumps says don't spam yo boy. Catty says medic. Gaga Grumps says M and D moved into 1 and 3. E still homeless. Gaga Grumps says medic works.
Crystal says medic.
Gaga Grumps says don't spam. Instant road to muting.
Fireworks for Gaga. It's summer for Miss Amy. Explode 'em on her face. She's in a happy place. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says Wordle in 3. Let's see those fireworks in the chat.
Fireworks for Gaga. Emojis make her happy. As in her face they slappy. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. From a single rose to a whole bouquet. Anything will be okay. If you can, that's okay. Smileys in chat still win the day. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says and you're still spamming British. A mute not enough. Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga Grumps says in what way, Ryan? Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle.
Well, Creative One says at GRUMPS, are you gonna sell the mod job to Ryan?
Gaga Grumps says have you checked if you need an app update? Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Crystal says at handbags for whiners, mine does too.
Grumps says next one who suggests audio gets a mute.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. A. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Grumps says at tea you were warm.
Like-a-thon, race to the top, like-a-thon, tap and don't stop, like-a-thon, who will be crowned, like-a-thon, gremlin renowned, like-a-thon, fingers on fire, like-a-thon, gremlins don't tire, like-a-thon, hearts be flying.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says Lexi won the race and Grumps cackled as he stole the crown.
A creative one says awake.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with a please Grumps.
Grumps says apart, let's have a wipeout.
Gaga Grumps says apart you got.
It's a Wordle wipeout.
Gaga Grumps says and a wipeout you got.
No letters to shout. Wipeout. Wipeout. Lost in the grid, can't figure it out. Wipeout. Oh no. Wipeout.
Oh, creative one says the
Grumps says at HANDBAGS4WHINERS. Grumps says closer.
Gaga Grumps says that's 6.
A creative one says what stickers are you putting up, Grumps? I can't see them.
Grumps says and has an R. Grumps says at ill-creative one wipeout ones.
Gaga Grumps says but close works. Gaga Grumps says C moved into number 1 Wordle Street and O and E need homes.
A creative one says, okay, I see then now. Lol.
Grumps says at ill-creative one.
Gaga Grumps says ahoy there landlubber.
Catty says coven.
Gaga Grumps says needs an e-jinx. Gaga Grumps says coven works.
Fireworks for Gaga. It's a performance.
Crystal says woven.
Explode 'em on her face. She's in a happy place. Fireworks for Gaga. Wordle within 3, so gifts explode with glee. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says Wordle in 3. Let's see those fireworks in the chat.
As in her face they slappy. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. From a single rose to a whole bouquet. Anything will be okay. If you can, that's okay. Smileys in chat still win the day. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Grumps says TikTok filters working overtime today. Who is being naughty?
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with K. Gaga Grumps says wrong button. Gaga grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like-a-thon, race to the top, like-a-thon, tap and don't stop, like-a-thon, who will be crowned, like-a-thon, gremlin renowned, like-a-thon, fingers on fire, like-a-thon, gremlins don't tire, like-a-thon, hearts beat
Gaga grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Grump says like jail for me today.
Gaga grumps says your word starting with K, please Ryan. Gaga grumps says kinda you got if it's valid.
Catty says it grumps on me if I tap too much it locks me out, so I have to restart it.
Gaga grumps says A moved into number 5 and N needs a new home.
Oscar says scuba.
Grump says it Catty is the name, it doesn't recognize you.
Oscar says no N.
Grump says it HANDBAGS4WHINERS no I.
Gaga grumps says no N in 3. Gaga grumps says or I indeed. Gaga grumps says see above lol.
The creative one says acorn.
Gaga grumps says hi Panos. Gaga grumps says A lived at number 5.
Grump says it ill creative 1A is in 5.
Gaga grumps says sauna fits.
Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga grumps says wow Wordle in 2 for L.
Explode 'em on her face, she's in a happy place.
Gaga Grumps says fireworks for hell.
Wordle within 3, so gifts explode with glee. Fireworks for Gaga. Emojis make her happy, as in her face they slappy. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says Wordle in 3. Let's see those fireworks in the chat.
Fireworks for Gaga. From a single rose to a whole bouquet, anything will be okay. If you can, that's okay. Smileys in chat still win the day. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Fireworks for Gaga.
Grumps says solved in 2 and yet not.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Grumps says at Jacob_314 what's so bad.
Gaga Grumps says how can joining in fireworks be a bad time? Or did you miss them? Lol. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says your curiosity is natural, but if you have any questions please leave them on my non-speaking pinned post for me to answer later.
Grumps says at Amlia she had it on someone and they ran off.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. S. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Grumps says at AR I know mute is without reason.
Gaga Grumps says you were probably spamming ARI.
like a thumb, race to the top like a thon. Tap and don't stop like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned like a thon. Fingers on fire like a thon. Gremlins don't tire like a thon. Hearts.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with S please Ryan.
Handbags for whiners says style.
Gaga Grumps says style you got.
Grumps says does he though?
Gaga Grumps says spamming your word over and over or spoiling today's Wordle are the usual reasons for muting.
Grumps says oh, nearly.
Gaga Grumps says a greenie lives at number 5 Wordle Street.
Handbags for whiners says it Grumps, yes.
Caddy says break.
Gaga Grumps says I have only one eye. Why did no one tell me? Lol.
HANDBAGS4WHINERS says that clips __ fin 0 ice.
Grumps says it HANDBAGS4WHINERS as evidenced by pink speedos.
Gaga Grumps says break fits.
Handbags for whiners says it Grumps, haha, yes.
Gaga Grumps says we added a homeless A. Gaga Grumps says no L for apple.
Caddy says mauve.
Handbags for whiners says it no apples.
Handbags for whiners says mauve.
Gaga Grumps says mauve works. Gaga Grumps says we added a homeless M.
Handbags for whiners says Annam.
Gaga Grumps says anime is a shout.
the box. Don't let her lose.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Don't let him push yours. Are you ready to play?
Handbags for whiners, says Fireworks.
Handbags for whiners, says GGGGWWWW.
Gaga Grumps says thanks E. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next word. Gaga Grumps says I think this will be the last game. Let's see if it finishes before 6. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
HANDBAGS4WHINERS says final.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. H. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Race to the top like a thorn. Tap and don't stop like a thorn. Who will be crowned like a thorn? Gremlin renowned like a thorn. Fingers on fire.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Hearts be flying like a thorn. Gremlins defying.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with H, please, Ryan.
Handbags for whiners says hands for handbags.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart E.
He says horse.
Gaga Grumps says hands you got.
Sarah not Sarah says stick.
Gaga Grumps says a yellow S in need of a home. Gaga Grumps says stick fits. Gaga Grumps says we added a homeless tea. Catty says burst.
Saren not Saren says trust.
Gaga Grumps says burst works. Gaga Grumps says you moved in the number 2 S&T still homeless.
Caddy says musty.
Saren not Saren says gusty.
Handbags for whiners says turds lol. I'll see myself out lol.
Gaga Grumps says I agree it's an USTY trap.
Handbags for whiners says lymph.
Gaga Grumps says 4 options. Let's confirm the trap.
Caddy says flogs.
Gaga Grumps says okay filter word with those letters.
Below some says, what happened to your eye?
Gaga Grumps says vlogs is good. Gaga Grumps says your curiosity is natural, but if you have any questions please leave them on my non-speaking pinned post for me to answer later.
Saren not Saren says her.
Below some says at Gaga, and Grumps okay also hello.
Handbags for whiners says at BL0 Summit rolled and ran off.
Gaga Grumps says lusty it is.
Saren not Saren says oh lusty. BLOSSON says that handbags for whiners are very funny.
Grumps says back to the hen night theme at the end.
Gaga Grumps says it had enough of spam and decided it didn't want to play any more lol. Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat. Gaga Grumps says thanks for joining me to play Wordle. I will be back at 4 PM UK tomorrow for more Wordle with Gaga.
Paddy says goodbye, take care all. Thank you for the link.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily Heart JS and awesome.
The LOSSO is his fight.
Gaga Grumps says your curiosity is natural, but if you have any questions, please leave them on my non-speaking him post for me to answer later.
Grumps says have a great evening, night for day one and all.
Sarah Not Saren says by Gaga. Take care X.
It's do or die, only in 3. A pretty sky.
Gaga Grumps says do you do the daily Wordle? I post mine on my page and would love you to share your results.